Today is the worst type of weather to try to be filming because it doesn't know if it wants to be sunny or not. So the clouds are literally going in and out every 2 seconds. So if the lighting is all over the place in this video, I do apologize. I gotta film this today, so we just gotta work with what we got. July is officially over, so it is time to do our monthly wrap up. I didn't read a whole lot of books this month, but I feel like the majority of the ones that I read were really, really good. So I'm very excited to talk about them. But first, let's talk about what we did in the month. So we did start off our month with the mid-year freakout tag, which is kind of crazy because July feels like it went by in a flash, but at the same time, I feel like I filmed that months ago. And then honestly, the rest of the month we didn't really do a whole lot. We went to the bookstore, which was a lot of fun, and then we did a big huge book haul. This month was all about just buying books, apparently. But I did get some reading done, so let's go ahead and talk about our books. The very first book that I read this month was Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and this was definitely one of my favorites of the month. It was such a good way to start the month. This is basically about a girl named Signa who was orphaned as a child, like a baby, and she basically spent her entire childhood hopping from family member to family member, and she kind of, within that, got the reputation of being cursed because every time she gets to a new home, her new caretaker ends up passing away shortly after. The back of the book says, "For as long as Signa Farrow has been alive, the people in her life have fallen like stars." And eventually she does end up on her very last remaining relatives' doorsteps, which are the Hawthorns. Her remaining relatives are the elusive Hawthorns, an eccentric family living at Thorn Grove, an estate both glittering and gloomy. Its patriarch mourns his late wife through wild parties while his son grapples for the control of the family's waning reputation, and his daughter suffers from a mysterious illness. So basically, she gets to the doorstep of this family, they welcome her in, but they're kind of all dealing with their own issues, and Signa's left to kind of just wander around by herself, and she ends up encountering the mother's spirit, which that is not a spoiler because it does say it on the back of the book. When their mother's restless spirit appears claiming she was poisoned, Signa realizes that the family she depends on could be in grave danger, and enlists the help of a Shirley stable boy to hunt down the killer. Signa's best chance of uncovering the murder, though, is an alliance with Death himself, a fascinating, dangerous shadow who has never been far from her side. Though he's made her life a living hell, Death shows Signa that their growing connection may be more powerful and more irresistible than she ever dared imagine. So yeah, there are so many things going on in this book. There's a murder mystery, like a whodunit kind of murder mystery, but then there's also this fantasy element of death being involved, like literal death, and she's always hated him, but at the same time, because she's been an orphan, he's always been this like one constant thing in her life. So although she hates him, she does find a little bit of comfort in him, and then yeah, they basically team up, her and Death, to solve this murder. And I actually ended up liking this book so much I felt compelled to actually write a review. Sometimes I like to do little updates while I'm reading books, like give little like thoughts on where I'm at in the book and that kind of thing on my Goodreads, and I do star rate the books when I'm done with them, but I never really write actual reviews, and this one I did. I said a winning combo of supernatural whodunit mixed with a little fantasy romance, and yeah, that's basically what this book is. Definitely a 5-star read for me. Freaking loved it, and I cannot wait for Foxglove, which is the second book in the series. Now let's move on to our next book, which was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Abby Jimenez has definitely become my favorite fluffy romance writer. I loved this book, and then in June I read Yours Truly. I gave both of the books 5 stars, and they're just so good. This one was basically about two people that are very, very different. We have the male character, I don't remember either of their names at this point, it was like a month ago. He lives in a super, super small town, he owns an inn, he's a woodworker, that kind of thing. And then we have the female character who lives in the city, she's an ER doctor, she lives in a really big house, has really nice things. So basically they're completely different people, and they're trying to kind of figure out a way to incorporate each other into their lives. And it's just such a good freaking book. It was so cute. But the thing that I like the most about Abby Jimenez's writing, and the thing that kind of like makes her book stand out from other kind of more fluffy romances, she's very good at like giving you that fluffy romance kind of plot and feelings, but then also kind of like intermingling a little bit of like a real life type of situation that kind of just, it's hard for me to explain, like it makes it more adult, I guess, or just kind of has a way of elevating your typical fluffy romance. And that is coming from someone that does not like anything that's too realistic or sad. I don't typically like to read, but again, she does it in a way where you just get like a little taste of it to kind of elevate the story, but like not enough to make it depressing, if that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and move on to our next two books, which are both by Emily McIntyre. We have Scarred and Wretched, which are books 2 and 3 in the Never After series. I loved these books so much. I read Hooked a couple of months ago and I liked that book. I believe I give it like 3 stars. There's definitely things that I liked about it, things that I kind of was like meh about. So honestly, going into Scarred, I kind of figured I would have similar feelings toward it, but I ended up rating both of these books 5 stars because I ended up liking them so much more than Hooked, which I was so surprised by. When I first got the Never After series, I thought they were different than what they are. Basically, I thought they were fantasy, and they are not fantasy. So I think that kind of like disappointed me right off the bat, whereas with these 2 books, I already knew what to expect more, so I was more open to it, I guess. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the books individually. So starting off with Scarred, the first thing that really kind of like hooked me to the story was actually the setting. Although these are not fantasy, this one did kind of have a little bit of that fantasy vibe because the setting does feel kind of medieval, which always just kind of makes me think of fantasy. These are not the medieval times. I don't actually know what time frame this is. That was actually the one thing that I also didn't like about this book, because at the end it got a little kind of, not confusing, but like the vibe got killed a little bit, but I'll talk about that in a second. First off, the setting of this and kind of like the characters and things like that made it feel kind of like a fantasy, even though it's not, because we've got 2 royal brothers, Tristan and Michael. Michael is going to be the new king, who the female character is betrothed to, and then we have Tristan, who is kind of like the misunderstood brother, aka Scar. It says, when their father dies, Michael is set to assume the throne and Tristan is set to steal it. The leader of a secret rebellion, Tristan will stop at nothing to end his brother's reign. But when Michael's new betrothed, Lady Sarah Beatrix, arrives, Tristan finds himself in the middle of a new kind of war. The kind that begs the question of what's more important, the crown or the woman about to wear it. So yeah, so basically there's like an eternal war between the Fossa family. The 2 brothers are fighting for the crown. But then we have Sarah, who's coming to marry the new king, but she's also got her own kind of vendetta because she believes that the Fossa family is involved or was the reason that her father got killed. So it's just kind of like a big mess of everyone trying to get revenge on another person. But then also in the middle of that, there's a romance. So overall, again, 5 stars, really love this book. The only thing that I didn't like that kind of killed the vibe a little bit for me at the very end, again, the entire book I felt like I was in this like fantasy medieval kind of setting, and then all of a sudden at the very, very end, we're thrown into a very, very modern type of situation, and it just felt very like separate from the rest of the story. And I don't feel like it was necessary, and it kind of killed the vibe a little bit at the very end, which was a little disappointing, but yeah. Anyway, oh, also I totally forgot to mention, the Never After series, each book is basically inspired by a different Disney movie, and Scarred is based off of The Lion King, which was one of my favorite Disney movies as a kid, and it was really, really fun to see all the, like, the little nods to The Lion King. That being said, the next one we have to talk about is Wretched, and this one is inspired by The Wizard of Oz. And I am not that familiar with The Wizard of Oz. I know the general plot and like characters, but I don't know that I've actually ever even seen the movie, if I'm honest. And if I did, it was a really long time ago. So the only things I really picked up from this book were super, super obvious things like having a yellow brick road and things like that. But that being said, this was still so good. And honestly, I think I even liked this one more than Scarred. I liked the setting of this one more, but I liked the storyline of this one better. And it's so funny because I definitely thought the opposite was going to be the case. I thought this was going to be like my least favorite of the entire series because it's basically about like a drug lord. It says Evelyn Westerly has always been the bad guy. As the brains, brawn, and botanist behind her family's drug empire, she's her father's ruthless secret weapon. So first off, the villain in this book is the female character, which I absolutely loved. I've definitely read a lot of books recently where they have very strong female characters. Specifically, they're usually in like fantasy romances or fantasy books where the female is almost as powerful or even on par with the male, but there's always still like this extra edge to the male character versus the female character. Not in this one. This one is basically about a romance between the brains, brawn, and botanist of a family drug empire and a DEA agent, which when I read the back of this, I'm gonna be honest, I was like, hate it. That is not a storyline that sounded at all appealing to me. But again, I really, really liked this. It was so good. I ended up liking these books so much that I instantly bought Twisted, which is on my shelf right there. So as soon as I'm done with the ACOTAR series, that's kind of like next on my list. Also, she does have a new book coming out, I think this month or next month, very, very soon. I don't remember what that one's called, but I'll put it on the screen so you can see it. I will also definitely be buying that as well. So all right, moving on. The next book that I read was Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman, and This is kind of the only book that I read this month that I didn't really care for. Right after I finished reading it, I did give it a 3-star rating, but I have changed it since then to a 2 because looking back, I just really don't remember much about this book and I don't feel excited about it. I basically just got this book because I read Funny You Should Ask last summer and I really liked it, and also they have like the cutest covers ever. But I read Funny You Should Ask, and although it was super unrealistic and very insta-love, which are usually things that I don't love, I still thought it was a really cute story. This one just flopped for me. I don't know. The story itself was decent enough for me to fully finish it, and I did read it pretty quickly, but like, I don't know, like I look back on my reading experience of this book and I feel kind of disconnected to it in a weird way. I didn't feel anything while I was reading this. It was just kind of something that I did with my time. Also too though, just the themings of this book and Funny You Should Ask, they're kind of about celebrities, which is definitely not something that I care about. This one's basically about like a singer, like a pop star, and then Funny You Should Ask was about an actor, and I don't feel connected to that at all. The covers of these books are so cute, and it's going to be very tempting if she comes out with another book with a similar cover, but honestly, after this one, I don't think I'll buy another one. I kind of even felt like that after Funny You Should Ask, but again, this cover was too cute, but this one kind of officially sealed its fate. Anyway, moving on, second to last book that we read this past month was Mountain Made of Glass. This was yet another win by Miss Scarlett St. Clair. I read this book on my Kindle, so I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was a pretty short book. I think it took me 4.5 hours or so to read the entire thing. Looking back on that book, I'm surprised at how many activities and characters and things that she was able to pack into this little bundle of a book. And this one is kind of like a fairy tale reimagining or retelling type of situation as well, where the overall plot of the book was very kind of like Beauty and the Beast, but then there was also a lot of nods to Snow White, with like there being 7 brothers involved in the story, there was a magic mirror, and that kind of thing. Again, with the whole like Beauty and the Beast plot line, essentially we have a girl who is kind of like the outcast of her town. I read this book like late at night in one sitting, so I kind of don't remember some of the like nitty-gritty details, but basically there was some kind of task in her town that a random member of the town is supposed to carry out, this like task to bring the entire town like good luck or something like that. And this time around, because she's the outcast, they're kind of like forcing her to do it, and they basically push her down a freaking well and tell her she has to kill this frog. So she does the task, and she's taken by the 6 fairy brothers, and her punishment for killing the frog is to be sent to the 7th brother, who is like the Beast, and she's kind of sent there to break his curse, which she has to say his like true name with love or something like that within a week. So it's very insta love. It's very like a fast-paced book, obviously, because it is a very short one. But again, the author packed so much into this little book. We had so many different characters. There were so many little like mini adventures throughout the book. Like, I highly recommend this little baby. Which also too, by the way, this is a spicy fantasy. If you're not familiar with my channel, Scarlett St. Clair in general is a spicy fantasy romance writer, and she's one of my favorites. So I literally think I've read every single thing from her at this point, except for the second book in a series that I just haven't gotten around to yet, but I do own it. We will be reading it in August. So yeah, I think that's everything I gotta say about that one. So the very last book that I have to talk about that we read in July was The Writing Retreat. I liked this book, but not as much as I thought it was going to. This is basically about a woman who gets kind of like the chance of a lifetime to not only meet, but like study with her favorite author, like an author that she's been obsessed with since she was a child. The sun just really came out. 5 attendees are selected for a month-long writing retreat at the remote estate of Rosa Vaho, something like that, the controversial high priestess of feminist horror. Alex, a struggling writer, is thrilled. Upon arrival, they discover they must complete an entire novel from scratch, and the best one will receive a 7-figure publishing deal. Alex's long-extinguished dream now seems within reach. But then the women begin to die. I really honestly loved the first half of this. It had a very, like, the whole buildup of the book was very kind of like ominous and creepy, like certain things that were happening in the house. It had a vibe, and I had a certain direction that I thought the book was going into, and I was really excited about it. But then the first twist happened, and the book literally flew in the entire different opposite direction. Like, it kind of went from like this cool, creepy, ominous, like haunted house vibes to just like full-on slasher film in a blink of an eye, and I just wasn't ready for it. I didn't really want it. So I don't know. My camera battery died, so we're back. I think I said everything that I had to say. So basically, I enjoyed the book. I gave it a 3.5 stars, I think. Yeah, 3.5 stars. It was a decent enough story. Overall, I enjoyed it. I just kind of felt a little like let down at the end, I guess. Like, it just went in a direction that I wasn't expecting and didn't really love. So there's that. And with that, those are all of the books that I read in July. If you're interested in any of the books that I read this month that I talked about, I will leave all of them linked down below. And I think that is everything that I have to say. I hope you guys have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you guys in my next one. Bye!